Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. I am Vanessa Rouse, a Leadership Tallahassee Class 33 graduate and also the Executive Director of the Village Square. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the 11th Annual Tallahassee Town Hall. We are so glad that you're here with us tonight in the WFSU Public Media Studio, and also welcome to those of you streaming online on Zoom and Facebook. We're so glad to be here with all of you. I'd like to thank our partners that made this possible: the City of Tallahassee, Leon County Government, the Tallahassee Democrat, Leadership Tallahassee, and WFSU, of course. Thank you for allowing us in your space for this beautiful evening. Also, a big, huge thank you to Tom Flanigan for moderating tonight and guiding us through these important questions. A quick note about tonight's format. We are dividing tonight into two different sections. First, we're going to hear from our city commissioners, and then we'll take a very short break, and then we'll hear from the county commissioners. We hope that this will allow more time for us to get into the topics and hear from all of our wonderful commissioners. Before we get started, we would like to ask for your help, please, this evening to help make this a civil and respectful conversation like we do at the Village Square. Please resist the urge for team clapping. That's when someone on your side or somebody you agree with says something you like and you clap. We'd like to ask you to give them a mental high five instead. Maybe sit on your hands a little bit. And then in the opposite direction, on the flip side, if you hear something you don't necessarily agree with, please resist the urge to groan and grumble. That will help us keep this conversation civil and respectful. The Village Square believes in the power of dialogue and disagreement. We think both are very important to a healthy democracy. And we know that conversations like this can be done civilly. So we thank you for your cooperation in that. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to Kim Kelling of WFSU. She will introduce you to our panel and moderator for this evening. I hope you enjoy the program. Kim?
Thanks, Vanessa. As I said earlier, I'm Kim Kelling. I'm a Leadership Tallahassee graduate, class 28, and I'm Director of Content and Community Partnerships here at WFSU Public Media. I'd like to welcome you all to the annual Tallahassee Town Hall. The mayor and all City of Tallahassee and Leon County commissioners were invited to tonight's event. And we'd like to extend a special thank you to those that are actually here with us this evening. So thank you for making time to be here. If you have any questions for the commissioners and you are here in the studio audience, you can write your question on the audience question sheet on your chair, or raise your hand if you didn't get a form and you'd like to fill one out. We'll have a volunteer bring it to you, and then they'll come and pick it up for you as well. If you're joining us on one of our live streams, you can ask your question on the Zoom Q&A or through the Facebook comment area, and we will be checking those. You can also use Twitter, hashtag TallyTownHall, and we'll have people monitoring that hashtag for questions. We will do our best as time allows to get to your questions towards the end of each segment. It's my pleasure now to introduce our distinguished panel for the first portion of this evening's program, starting with City Commissioner Jack Porter. Next, we have Mayor Pro Tem Diane Williams-Cox, and last, City Commissioner Curtis Richardson.
Thank you, Kim.
We did have Jeremy Matlow did respond that he was coming, and then unfortunately is not feeling well tonight, so he was not able to join us, and our mayor is traveling. So thank you for being here tonight. And now I'm delighted to introduce my colleague and moderator for the evening, Tom Flanigan. I don't know if anyone in this room doesn't know who Tom Flanigan is. If you do not know who Tom Flanigan is, well, then you have a treat tonight to get to know him. He is a old school journalist who believes in listening to people and getting their stories. My job really is to keep Tom from going to work 7 days a week. That's really the biggest job I have. He is out every weekend trying to cover local events to tell the story of what's going on in Tallahassee. So, Tom, thank you for being our moderator tonight. He's been with WFSU for 17 years, and he is definitely a wonderful part of our organization. I'm turning it over to you, Tom. Good luck.
Thank you, Kim. And need I tell you, I have a wonderful boss. Guys, thank you so much for coming out and being part of our City Hall tonight. As Kim already said, we're going to start with our members of the Tallahassee City Commission. We are going to delve into some really hot and frothy issues this evening. These are things that I'm sure are top of mind when it comes to everybody, particularly now with the Florida legislature in full hue and cry, much of which they're doing, also impacting the folks here in the city and also the county folks who we'll hear from shortly. But I do have some really important questions that I want to impose on these folks just to kind of get things started. We're going to drill down into some heavy stuff here. Commissioner Porter, what superpower would you want, and which super curse would you give your arch enemy?
Oh my goodness.
What super curse? I think that my superpower would be unlimited energy. And I think my super curse would be never ending drowsiness.
I like that. Nice response. Commissioner Diane Williams-Cox, are hot dog sandwiches?
Absolutely. Ketchup, mustard, relish.
Bread.
Absolutely.
Okay, and we'll discuss that further next time I run into you at Village Inn. Okay, and Commissioner Curtis Richardson, you have two lovely young ladies as daughters, but they're kind of above the target demographic for this question. How would you describe your job to a 5-year-old?
To a 5-year-old, to make the rules for them to live by.
These guys came prepared. Congratulations. All right, we're really going to get into some other issues right now.
Right.
And let's see if there's something we all can agree on. There's plenty that we can find that put differences amongst us. But let's start off with an easy one here. Trust and civility. What do you think all of you can agree on, even your two colleagues who weren't here tonight? And how are you similar to your colleagues? And Commissioner Diane Williams-Cox, let's start with you on that.
Okay. I think that our similarities are that we want to do a great job. We want to do what's best for the residents of the city of Tallahassee, and not only the city of Tallahassee, but the world. Tallahassee is a capital of the third largest state in the union, and we want to make sure that we make sure that we're a light that shineth upon the hill. So I think we all agree with that. Where the difference is that we have a difference in opinion of how to do that. And of course we would. We are operating with different brains. We're coming together with different experiences. And so those differences are where we can work together and respect the fact that we are different, but we have the same mission, the same goal.
Okay, same question for you, Commissioner Richardson, please.
Yeah, well, I think, Tom, what we all have in common, and it's certainly been true for me over the last over 20 years, is a desire, a sincere desire to serve this community and to improve the quality of life of citizens throughout this community, wherever they live. Tallahassee has been twice designated an All-America City, but unfortunately, during those two designations, not everybody, depending on where you lived, felt like they lived in an all-America city. So I think all of us are committed to making sure that wherever an individual or family lives in our community, they are a part of that all-America city. That's what we share in common. Again, as Commissioner Williams-Cox said, we may differ on our opinions on how to get there, but I think we all have that sincere desire to make that happen. throughout the city.
Appreciate that, Commissioner Porter.
I agree with my colleagues. I think what we first and foremost have in common is that we love Tallahassee. We love Tallahassee. We love the people. We love the natural beauty, and we want to serve and protect our beautiful city. So, and it's a pleasure to be able to share that in common, and that's the most important thing.
All right. Kind of moving in the same orbit, if we could here, the next one. Since this is under the auspices of the Village Square, and again, we thank those folks so much for being an integral part of this community and trying to find some of those commonalities and things that, yes, we can agree on, but also how do we interpret our differences and maybe come to a greater understanding of what those differences are. So the Village Square certainly believes in the power of dialogue and disagreement, and also growing civil discourse on all of these divisive issues that we have. Ways to increase civility include listening to others with an open mind, understanding issues that are seldom black and white and are often on a really long continuum, and also acknowledging that people are complicated. We aren't simple beasts. We aren't, and we have different values and priorities. So what could be done as a community, and maybe more importantly, what would you do personally to improve the level of civility in our community, which sometimes has slipped, particularly in recent years? Commissioner Porter, let's start with you and work back down.
I think that it starts, especially as a commissioner, in setting the tone, in making sure that I am reflective, that I'm thinking about, I'm constantly asking myself, I don't know how to perfectly be a commissioner. I'm still new to this. And even if I weren't new to this, I think there's always room to grow. I think that listening to the public, getting into the weeds, not being afraid to have difficult conversations, conflict is not fun for anyone. And I didn't run to, just to fight with people all of the time. I want to serve the community. And we all want that. So I think starting looking within and not being afraid to have those difficult conversations.
Okay, Commissioner Williams-Cox.
I think that what we need to do, and what I try to do, is to be a good example. Now, there are times when we have to understand that in these positions, we are human beings, and words do matter, and words do hurt, and actions do as well. And I cannot pretend that something that is said does not hurt. So my job is to figure out how to deal with that, and I try to be very honest. I'm at the age now where I can be very honest. If I don't appreciate the way I was dealt with, I have to let you know. But I have to learn to do it in a way that we can grow from it and not just be divided from it. But I think it's very important to be clear and be transparent, because I think that people treat you how you allow them to treat you. And many times in these positions, we suffer quite a bit of abuse at meetings. Believe it or not, y'all see it. So we have to understand when to speak and when not to speak. And I think that it is important to lead by example.
Okay, and we'll end it up with you, Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Tom. And civility has always been something that's been very important to me personally and to my family. We've taught that to my daughters. My wife preaches that and lives that on a daily basis. Because you can't work with others if you don't know how to be civil. This community has blessed me to serve it in a number of different capacities, as a school board member, as a state legislator, and now as a city commissioner. And in order to get anything done in either of those capacities, you have to know how to communicate to others and be civil, understand their issues. You may not always agree, but you understand the issues that they're facing, and you try to work collaboratively to come to solutions to those issues that everybody can be happy with and satisfied with, and it moves our community forward. You absolutely cannot be successful in those roles or in roles throughout the community. I make myself available wherever and whenever I can to hear what others have to say and to process what they have to say and make it a part of my agenda to make this community a better place for us all. And that's, I think, what civility is all about.
Unfortunately, not everyone in the community is as civil as we would like them to be.
Yes.
And if you amp that up to kind of an ultimate level, you see what happened in 2022. We had 108 shootings, resulting in 19 deaths, 91 injuries. And in the first 3 months of this year alone, there have been 19 shootings, and
Right.
that resulted in 2 deaths, 13 injuries. 2 weeks ago, a Tallahassee pharmacist was taken into custody with a total of 25 guns, hundreds of rounds of ammunition, bulletproof vests, explosives in his car.
Sure.
Not a very Tallahassee approach to life, I think we all could agree. So, can we say our situation in Tallahassee when it comes to crime is improving? And what can be done to move that ball further down the field?
Right.
And Commissioner Richardson.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. And in our strategic plan, public safety is the #1 priority in this community. I have been personally impacted by it. In my neighborhood, 25 yards from my front door, a 16-year-old was shot and killed on the church grounds in my neighborhood. He was a personal friend of my 17-year-old daughter, and he was killed by one of our next door neighbors. We were devastated by that experience. And I vowed then personally, but certainly as a city commissioner, to address the issue of violent crime in our community. We've seen other crimes, the sheriff and police department show that those crimes are actually being reduced, but violent crime is one, and we're not as bad as some other places, but one unnecessary or senseless killing is one too many, especially when it comes to our children and young people who are our future. And so we've committed our dollars, we've committed our time, we've committed our resources to addressing that issue as a community. And it's going to be a community solution. We won't be able to police ourselves out of this problem. This community is going to have to come together and combine its resources and talents and desires to make that a reality.
Okay, Diane Williams-Cox.
I think that when we look at where we are, and agreeing with Commissioner Richardson, we've made public safety our #1 priority. And so when it's your #1 priority, you're keenly focused on making sure. I live on the South Side just like Commissioner Richardson does. And so there are things that happen sometimes on the South Side that folks don't think happen in other places, but that's not true anymore. They're happening all over our city. And so we've got to make sure that we have ample law enforcement, community involvement, neighborhood watch, folks who see something, say something. We've increased our contribution to Crime Stoppers so that folks will understand that, I don't like to say snitches get stitches. I like to say snitches get riches, because you can now, we've provided additional funding so that Crime Stoppers can pay more to report these crimes and things when they happen. We've got to do this ourselves. We can't expect someone to come from somewhere to do this for us. And so we've got to see something, say something, and make sure that we fix what our issues are. When we see a crime occurring or we know something about a crime, we've got to report it. Because if we don't, then folks are on the street ready to do it again because they got away with it. So I think it's up to us. It's for us, by us. We're going to have to do it ourselves.
Thank you, Commissioner Porter.
Thank you, Tom. I think that we're headed in the right direction. I think that we've seen, like other parts of the country, where during COVID, gun violence shot up and it has not gone down. So this is a serious issue. We are committed to this. We've taken certain steps. I see collaboration that doesn't seem like has been there before, working with our school board, working with our sheriff, trying to make sure that we're not duplicating services but I think that we need to have, and we are doing this, but I would like to see us do even more of seeing it, of course, as the entire umbrella of quality of life issues, the number of evictions, the number of expulsions, those kinds of things all play a part into this. And so having that holistic vision is really critical.
Yeah, and Tom, might I add, I hope that the situation is not exacerbated now by this open carry law that the governor has signed. I pray that it doesn't, but there is a chance. And so we're going to have to redouble, all of us are going to have to redouble our efforts under those circumstances to make sure that we don't see an escalation in violent crimes, particularly gun crime in our community.
Thank you for adding that. And before we leave the public safety arena, this certainly doesn't rise to the level of malfeasance that we've just been addressing. But the other night, a demonstration around Tallahassee City Hall, two leaders of the Democratic Party of Florida, including a sitting Florida senator, taken into custody. I wanted to get just your thoughts on that incident and any follow-up you might have. Commissioner Porter?
Thank you, Tom. I think for me, it's pretty simple. We don't arrest peaceful protesters. That's my view.
Okay.
I don't think it was protecting public safety. They were not disrupting any government function. They weren't a danger to others or to themselves. I wish it had been handled differently. I've spoken to people who I know in other parts of the country who are in law enforcement, who told me that that's not how they would have handled it. I think that we have a special responsibility as the capital city, not only to residents of Tallahassee, but also to all of Florida who come here, and we have the opportunity to be a place of refuge for those who want to express their views peacefully, and I wish that it had happened differently.
Okay, Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Tom, as you probably know, I have no problem with civil disobedience. None. I've participated in protests myself. But that fight is not at City Hall. It was across the street at the Capitol. And all day long, our folks have been working with the protesters, and they've been told what to do and what not to do. Barricades were put up, but they went to the other side of the barricades. And I've talked directly to police officers, and I'm told that some of those individuals told them that they were making the decision to be arrested. So we have laws, we have rules that we must abide by. We have a homeless population downtown. And if we allow folks to come from out of town, because many of the folks who were arrested were from out of town, if we allow them to come from out of town and set up camps, then once they're gone, the next group of someone could be homeless or whomever decide to set up camp. So then what are we doing? We've relinquished City Hall, and we cannot do that. It is not safe to do that for everyone. And if we allow them to sleep there the other night, that's another liability. So the rules were clear. They were spelled out. They were warned several times. And the law, you broke the law, you have to abide by it, as we've heard. No one is above the law. And I think back to when Dr. King and others did this. They were trying to get people registered to vote. They were trying to get people the right to vote. And they didn't do this to get arrested, but they knew that it was possible. So I'm not understanding why we're shocked. If you break the law, then you could be arrested. And you were told that many times. So unfortunately, it happened. And I hope we learn and grow from it.
All right, final word, Commissioner Richards.
Yeah, just to continue part of Commissioner William Cox's conversation, we covet, as African Americans, we covet that right to peacefully protest. Because without that, Commissioner Williams Cox nor I would be sitting on this dais. My parents weren't able to vote as I was growing up prior to the 1965 Civil Rights Act. It was out of protest, peaceful protest, that those rights were extended to people like me in this country. We can't take that for granted. And so I'm going to champion that right for others who choose to do that in a peaceful and lawful, legal manner. I will champion that. But it has to be legal. It has to be lawful. And so what happened here recently, unfortunately, people disobeyed our ordinances. We have ordinances here in Tallahassee that are our rules and laws that people have to obey. The discussion started last Friday when they got a permit. They blasted on social media that, bring your tents and your sleeping bags. We're going to camp out in front of City Hall. Well, our ordinance says that that's not lawful. Our City Hall is operated by our Parks and Recreation Department, and we have clear ordinances, a clear ordinance about what can and cannot happen in our parks. And part of it is what Commissioner Williams Cox said. We have a homeless population that had just taken over our beautiful Lake Ella, our downtown chain of parks, And so we had to rectify that situation by enforcing our ordinance. And so they're there during the day. You see homeless people in our parks during the day, but at night we try to find a place for them to be housed, or they find a place for themselves. So, and I champion also the cause that was being protested. I am 100% as a legislator. I was one of the top champions in the Florida legislature on a woman's right to choose. I have a wife and 2 daughters, and I want them to always be in control of what their health care will be like. And so I champion that cause as well, Tom. But unfortunately, there were those who chose to disobey the law. And when you disobey the law, there are consequences to that.
Okay, folks, we'll have to move to the next one here. A little bit more positive, if you will. Right now, our unemployment rate in the Tallahassee Metro is at 2.7%. That was for February. It is below the national average of 3.5%. And many employers are still having a pretty tough time recruiting and finding employees. So, with concerns ongoing that this problem may even get worse with Amazon now coming online and needing to fill 1,000 positions out there in the warehouse, what can you tell us about projections for the job market in the community and how you could help maintain a healthy supply-demand balance when it comes to that? Commissioner Porter?
You know, one thing that is a passion of mine is walkability and connectivity. And we've seen time and time again that a walkable community is actually one of the greatest sources of economic mobility. It gives people access to jobs, access to education, access to technical instruction. So I think that that's a role that the city can step into. We're having conversations about how we can make sure that our bus system is optimized. I know that's not going to change the whole thing, but I think supporting our small and local businesses, I think we need to raise the minimum wage. That's not something that the city itself can do for private businesses, of course, but cost of living is not keeping up. The wages are not keeping up with the cost of living. It's a serious problem, but supporting our small businesses, where we know the money stays local, supports our local economy, I think that's the best way forward.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Richardson, then back to you, Diane.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. You know, when I first came to Tallahassee, this was a government and college town, and those were the jobs that you got. And you stayed on one of those jobs or in a position in one of those state departments for 30 years, and you retired with a pretty decent retirement pension. But that's no longer the case. And so one of our priorities has been to expand our private sector employment base in the city of Tallahassee. And I think we've done a good job of that. We just recently extended our penny sales tax for another 20 years, and part of that, 12% of the proceeds from that, are for economic development. And the purpose of that is to bring the Amazons and the Danfoss Turbocores and the private sector businesses, both small and large. We're supporting our mom and pop businesses here in town as well, so that they can hire individuals in those jobs. Tom, one of the things that I'm proud of, I am a member of Women Wednesday. And one of the things that we're doing next week, if women are interested, we're trying to encourage women to go into the construction trades. There are tremendous opportunities. I retired from Lively Technical College, and I can tell you I'm a disciple of career and technical education as a result, a person with 3 college degrees. And so we're next Wednesday, we're going to have a group of women come to the facilities at TCC and hopefully pique their interest in trades, in jobs in the trades and career and technical fields, and get them trained to take those jobs, Tom. But I don't know, after COVID, it just seems like all of our employers are having a hard time recruiting qualified employees. And so we've got to make sure that we identify them, get them trained, and then, of course, get them employed. And I think that undergirds part of the crime problem that we're seeing. When people are working and being gainfully employed and providing for themselves and a family, they are less likely to be involved in criminal activity.
Very fine. Commissioner Williams-Cox.
I think the key is making sure that we are paying livable wages and providing benefits so that parents and young people are able to earn a good living and know how to earn money. One of the things that we do at the City of Tallahassee is we have a Tallahassee Future Leaders Academy. And what we do with those young people is during the summertime, we provide monies for them. They work, they're trained and they're working in the community and they get paid. I remember a few years ago, pre-COVID, I asked them, what are you going to do with your first paycheck? Most of them said they were going to buy food. And so I know growing up in Gadsden County, I worked in the tobacco fields to earn money, to buy school clothes, to help my family. And so I think that what we can do is make way to provide livable wages, health benefits, because you got to be healthy to be able to work, and to provide a good academic system so that folks can receive the training. As Commissioner Richardson mentioned, the lively career to technical programming is excellent. I too have several degrees, but a welder coming out of Lively is going to make a whole lot more money than I've ever made. so we can't sleep on that. So additional training and paying people livable wages and good health care benefits and housing, because if they're able to work and be able to afford, they'll be able to afford housing as well.
Speaking of jobs, you guys have a job too, and that is if you would like to weigh in on the conversation. We do have pieces of paper that are scattered around here. You can post your question on that, and we will be picking it up and getting it into the mix here. We're less than 15 minutes away from your Q&A as we try to leaven in some of those questions into our conversation here with members of the Tallahassee City Commission. Let's get into development. Always a non-controversial, easygoing kind of topic here in this town. It continues to stir debate and controversy and often causes kind of uncivil discussions in the community, as these guys can attest from the regular city commission meetings. Can you say comprehensive plan? What is your current assessment of the balance between growth and quality of life preservation? And is the community in a better or a worse posture now than maybe it was 5 years ago? And if I dare to ask, has the dialogue improved or declined in that time? Commissioner Porter, and then we'll go back this way.
Thank you. I think that we are growing. We are obviously growing. And I think that reviewing our comprehensive plan is going to be critical. I am concerned about the way that we are growing, not that we are growing, but the way that we're growing. I think that when we see the values of our residents, the things that they hold dear about why they call Tallahassee home, has been threatened, is being threatened. That being said, I think there's a lot of opportunity to make revisions, to update our comprehensive plan, to listen to each other, and to have really difficult conversations about how we want to grow. Because ultimately, you either grow out or you grow up. And not everyone wants that. So we're going to have to dig into those details. But I'm excited for those conversations that are coming up. It's a great opportunity. But I do think I've expressed before, I've had concerns about undue influence of certain developers in the development process in Tallahassee. And I think we've got to nip that in the bud with our comprehensive plan.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Williams-Cox.
Well, from conversations that we hear often at commission meetings, it's like being a developer is a dirty word, but we want affordable housing. How are we going to get it if we don't have developers? I'm not building a house, so we're going to have someone who knows how to do it. My son just purchased a home recently. You know how hard it was for him to find a house to buy that he could afford? So as we continue to grow and people continue to move to Tallahassee, or as the governor's telling everybody to move to Florida because it's free, we're going to have to figure out how to grow smartly, how to get ahead of the curve, not wait until this time, but we've got to look out into the future as far as we can and try to make some things happen. We don't know what the future holds, but we can look at some indicators from where we've been and where we've come from to try to figure out where we might be going. And I'm no expert on comprehensive plans. I sat on the planning commission as a citizen, but that doesn't make me an expert. My ears are open. I'm learning, and I'm trying to think about what I'm hearing in our community, as well as my lived experience where I live and other parts of our community, to make sure that we stay ahead of our growing curve. Because when you start bursting at the seams because we didn't prepare for the future, then we lose people because they can't find housing. And I attended an event recently with realtors, and it had been said that we have 2,000 realtors and 200 homes. How are we ever going to get ourselves out of that unless we figure out how to grow and build homes that are affordable, or workforce housing, or low income or low rent housing, so that folks can have somewhere to stay? I'm very proud of the work that we at the City of Tallahassee are doing. The Orange Avenue apartments are going up. If you drive by there every day, you see that that's happening, as well as other parts. We partner with Habitat for Humanity. And the apartments over on Magnolia, not Magnolia Terrace, but on Magnolia Drive, we're doing what we can, being smart, allowing people to use their money to do it. And so I think that we have much more to learn and much more to do.
Okay, Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Tom. It's a very good question. And, 20 years ago, we had to ask ourselves as a city, how were we going to grow, where we were going to grow. We were growing. We didn't have that a question or okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah, they'll pick it up.
Okay,
Commissioner.
I thought he was okay. And so we formed a committee that we called Blueprint 2000, and we laid out a plan for how we were going to grow as a city. It wasn't the comprehensive plan. That's a required document for how communities are to grow, where things can go, how they can be built, and that sort of thing. But we were growing, and we didn't have the infrastructure in place to address that growth. And so we came together as a committee, neighborhood associations, the business community, developers, and others, chamber representatives, and we developed Blueprint 2000, which laid out a 20-year plan for addressing those infrastructure issues. You can't grow without the appropriate infrastructure in place. We're still working on that. As I mentioned, we extended that penny sales tax another 20 years. We identified infrastructure projects were needed. I'm proud to say that of the 32 infrastructure projects that will be completed over the next 5 years, 18 will be on the south side of town for a total of $270 million. You're talking about improving the quality of life for people like me and Commissioner Williams-Cox, who live on the south side of town and have made a commitment to improving that part of our city. So we are growing out. We've got a limited amount of room to grow in Tallahassee and Leon County. We're looking at infill development, but when we look at infill development, we've got to keep gentrification in mind, the G word, if we're going to build in those neighborhoods that are traditionally, particularly African-American neighborhoods. And so that's where we are as a community. We're working jointly with the county because we're all in this together. We've got to make sure that we're all on the same page when it comes to growth and where we will grow, how we will grow. Commissioner Williams-Cox talked about the need for housing. That's an important issue, and how we address that issue and where is another issue. So we have got tremendous challenges, and we're juggling a lot of balls in the air because we've got to protect our environment. We are proud to say we've got more of a tree canopy now than we did 50 years ago. We love our trees, and we're going to protect them. So it's a challenge, but we have to grow because the people are coming here, and they're going to need the resources in order to make Tallahassee the kind of community that brought us here and has kept us here all this time.
Folks, before we turn this over to our audience questions, I have one final one. And since we are in the midst of the Florida legislative session, we are still hearing more and more issues that are being preempted by state lawmakers and being pulled out of the purview of local government. So starting with you, Commissioner Richardson, then coming back to Commissioner Porter, what do you do about that going forward, whether it's permitless carry or landlord-tenant relationships? Sure. There's a host of them.
Sure.
So what does a city like the city of Tallahassee do, particularly when you have a big chunk, potentially, of your electric revenues being threatened by what they're talking about here with municipal utilities?
Right.
Don't talk about it.
And that's a tremendous issue. And Tom, that first came to even though I served 8 years in the legislature, that came to my attention when I had neighbors of mine in the Jake Gaither neighborhood come to me and tell me that there were people walking around their neighborhood and they didn't know who they were. Well, it turns out they were living in a group home. The state had bought property in their neighborhood and established a group home for people with disabilities, returning citizens, and they didn't know who they were. Well, when we did the research, we found out that those were not regulated by local government, that we had been preempted by the state in terms of that regulation. And we see that happening more and more. Every year, more and more of the authority of local governments are being preempted by the state. Government that is closest to the people, to me, is the best government, and that is our local government. I can tell you, I've been both places. And so with the electric utility, they're trying to tell us now that we own our own utility here in the city of Tallahassee. They're trying to limit the amount of money that we can transfer from the utility general fund to our city's operating general fund. That could be upwards of a $10 million hit for our general fund in the city if that bill is passed, which could mean, if that happened, an increase in your property taxes or some other assessment. We are fighting like hell to make sure that that doesn't happen. The Florida League of Cities is on top of it because we see this pattern and we've got to make sure that it stops.
Okay, any other ideas, Commissioner Williams?
I was saying, don't talk about it because last I checked, it might not happen.
Yeah.
But we don't want to remind them that it's still on the table.
But
we at the Commissioner Richardson mentioned the Florida League of Cities. You know, it's a group of all of the cities in the state of Florida, 411 cities, towns, and villages. And we just had our legislative days this week at the Capitol. And our theme is local voices, local choices. And so what we're doing is we're trying to have those conversations. And this year's president of the league, her theme is # common grounds. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we have those relationship building opportunities with our local delegation and others to help them understand how we feel and relate to how we know they feel, and take it to their dinner table, or take it to their grocery store, take it to their community to help them understand that locally we're going to make the better choices because we are right here. This is where we live and breathe, and that will happen throughout the state. So we've just got to continue to foster good relationships here in with our local delegation. We had some changes, and so what I've been doing is making sure that I have a good, positive working relationship with our local delegation because they're the ones who are going to have to carry the water for us across the street and go over and testify when need be to let them know, ouch, it's hurting. Please help.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Porter, you get the last word on that.
We sue. We sue. We have before, and sometimes that's an option that we have to take, obviously. We take our position seriously as responsible for the financial viability of our city. We don't just sue for no reason, but home rule is enshrined in the Constitution. It's important, and that's not something that we should easily give up. I know that all of my colleagues agree on this, and this is going to have major consequences for our city. We need to do everything we can to fight back against it.
You'll have about 4 weeks to go in the Florida legislative session. Watch this space, and we'll try to keep you folks filled in day to day on Capitol Report and through other means of what's going on down there. Your turn, folks, when it comes to questions for our esteemed members of the Tallahassee City Commission. Thank you so much for this. Let's try this one. What short and long terms for affordable housing would you suggest, particularly given the rise in the incidence of the unhoused and panhandling in our community? Start with you, Commissioner Porter.
I just want to make sure I understand. So what are short-term and long-term solutions?
To homelessness, and we can fold affordable housing in there too. We've already touched on it, but that seems to be a pretty salient point in this discussion.
Yeah, hopefully that our local ability to address these issues isn't preempted, but there's a lot we can do. I think we need to start with a housing first model, which has been successful in other parts of the country. That means getting people into housing and providing them services that they need to live stable, independent lives. Renter protections is something that we can do as a short-term intervention. Building units, which we know we need to do, takes time and money that we don't always have. But there are all kinds of things, diversion programs to keep people in their homes. Source of income protections, for example. So if your income is Social Security, you can't be denied a place to live because that's your source of income. Things that can keep people in their home. Things as simple as a helpline, as funding our legal services. So because we know that it's something insane. Like you are 70% more likely to avoid eviction if you have legal counsel. These are affordable interventions that we can take to keep people in their homes.
Okay. Commissioner Williams-Cox.
Some of the things that we've done is we've changed our ordinances to allow for old hotels to be refurbished, to create housing for individuals, workforce housing, affordable housing, old office complexes, and other things that we've done, because we see the need. You see these vacant buildings in the community, and we have folks who want to come in and purchase those. We've provided those incentives to allow them to be able to refurbish those and turn those into either workforce housing or some type of affordable housing. And, you know, there's a great debate on what is affordable. Well, you know, there is a federal definition of what affordable is. But if you're not able to even afford that, then we have to look at something more low rent. So those short term, that's what we need to look at. Long term, we're going to have to continue to grow and create more affordable housing opportunities. It means that we're going to have to grow out or up and do it with infilling.
Okay, Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you, Tom. And well, in our strategic plan, housing, affordable housing, workforce housing, low-income housing, and let me tell you, when somebody says affordable, that doesn't that there are lots of definitions of affordable housing. There are people who can afford Golden Eagle. There are people that can afford Orange Avenue, and it's the whole range from there. So we have to make sure that there's housing available for people in all of those income ranges. One of the things that I'm proud of is when I came to the commission, I fought. It took me 4 years to do it, to get South City included in the Frenchtown Southside CRA. Well, because that happened, we were able to redevelop and revitalize the Orange Avenue apartments. If you know where that is, it's on Orange Avenue near Jim Lee Road. That will be almost 300 low-income housing units administered by the Tallahassee Housing Authority. Housing is our second highest priority as a city. There are long-term and short-term solutions, as Commissioner Williams-Cox has mentioned. We've got the Kearney Center, funded largely by Rick Kearney and donations that houses those who are homeless. We've got the Hope Community. I was just in a meeting with Liza McFadden and Holly yesterday talking about their desire to purchase some land for the city to build 72 units for homeless veterans in the northwest part of town. As Commissioner Williams-Cox mentioned, we have changed ordinances to repurpose these old hotels and motels and apartment buildings that are not being used because the students are moving closer in to the campuses. Our community redevelopment agency does a lot to give money to individuals to refurbish and redevelop their homes so that they can stay in those homes, a lot of times in distressed neighborhoods. I serve on the Tallahassee Lenders Consortium Board of Directors, which looks at housing. It's one of our partners. I'm on the also on the board. I represent the city on the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. It's we have an independent committee for the city and the county, and we also work jointly to come up with solutions to the housing issues that affect us in this community, that whole range of housing opportunities. So it's certainly something on our radar screen, and we're devoting time, energy, and effort every day to make sure that those who want to be housed are housed in our community.
We have a question here that relates to climate change, and most likely the more immediate impact of climate change on a city like Tallahassee is an increase in the number and potentially the severity of hurricanes, which, as we have seen, no longer batten themselves to death against the shoreline, but now have a tendency to come further inland and wreak destruction there. So has the city of Tallahassee made additional provisions within its budgetary structure or preparedness models to handle more severe storms, particularly since the electric department is one of the major casualties in any case when we have a storm like that? Commissioner Porter?
Thank you, Tom. Frankly, I'm not entirely sure the answer to that question. I have the utmost faith in our utility department to be addressing those issues. I know that we are undergoing an evaluation and our clean energy plan, and so those are things that I know we are actively reviewing and addressing. I don't know whether we have a strategy at this time, but it's a great question and something that I'd be happy to follow up on.
Okay, let's get some input here from your colleagues here. Commissioner Williams-Cox.
We have a group of very smart individuals who are dealing with our climate model, as well as storms included, but really is looking at what we're doing with our renewable energy plan, as well as what are we doing with our climate control. They've been working. They work with the group of young individuals who met with them to find out what we're doing and where we're doing it, and dealing with environmental justice. So we do have a section of the city of Tallahassee that is their job to do that. I can't think of their names right off the top of my head, but they presented to us at commission meetings on where we are and what's going on with the renewable energy plan, as well as what's happening in the climate arena. I too see what is happening around us. We've just been really blessed that we haven't had what's happening just north of us and just to the west of us. We've just been remarkably blessed that it has not happened. But we're always ready to go and help in those communities when these things happen. But sooner or later, we've got to make sure that we are in a position to recover when it happens. You know, when Michael hit, I wasn't on the commission at that time, but the plan was get Tallahassee restored so that Tallahassee could feed the region. So I know that there's a plan for that to keep things going. So we, as my colleague said, we can get you some more up-to-date information, but we have some very smart people who are working in that arena.
Okay, very good. And any insights you have, Commissioner Richardson?
Thank you, Tom. You know, one of the things in the neighborhood where I live, at one point, if the wind blew too hard, our lights would go off. And so we, you know, would call the city. We were in church one Sunday morning, and all of a sudden the lights went out in the church. So we kept calling the city, and they'd send somebody out, and they'd restore the utilities. Well, what it turned out to be was we had tree limbs growing over the electric lines. And when the tree limbs would fall, they would snap the electrical lines. So the city developed a tree trimming program, which we have to this day. And I can't remember the last time we had a problem in my neighborhood with the electricity going out. And I used to get those calls all the time, and I don't get them like I used to. But the city is very aggressive, Tom. We've passed in terms of clean energy and protecting our environment. I mentioned we hired an arborist to make sure that we are protecting our trees, because we know that they absorb most of the carbon that we emit from ourselves, from automobiles, and so we want to protect them. We are out in the meeting that I attended last night that was put on by our housing department. We talked about hardening our community centers so that if something happened, like a hurricane, God forbid, or tornado, we have those community centers that people in the neighborhood can go to and be protected. So we're doing that. We are increasing the number of electric vehicles in our bus fleet. We just have a partnership with Florida State University, and I think we just purchased either 8 or 11 electric buses that they're using now in their fleet. And we also are looking at including the EV, I believe it is, where you can plug your car in and recharge it in homes throughout the community, so that we can encourage the use of electric vehicles over the traditional cars that we're using. And again, as Commissioner Porter talked about, our bus system, we've got to make our bus system more efficient, if you will. people are more apt in Tallahassee to get in their car and drive to where they want to go because our bus system is not as efficient as it should be to get people where they want to go when they need to be there. And so we're working on that as well. But again, it's something that all of us, I thank all of those organizations that work with us to put together our climate plan to be carbon neutral by 2050. We're aggressively trying to beat that date, but it's going to take all of us working together to make that happen.
One last thing. I call it the 30-second wish list. One thing you would like to do while you're still on the commission that you haven't touched yet, Commissioner Richardson.
Tom, I want to see economic development happen on the south side of Tallahassee. I moved there 30 years ago. My wife and I built our home 27 years ago and have raised our children there. And one of the things that we just had happen that it was distressing for a lot of people, my family included, was the CVS closed. And it's a density issue, but that's what I was told by the manager, that not enough people were purchasing goods from that CVS. And so we've got to look at how we can increase economic development in areas like that. Certainly the infrastructure in place will help, but then we can attract businesses to the area to create jobs and housing and address the crime issue in a lot of those neighborhoods as well.
Okay, thank you. 30 seconds, Commissioner Williams-Cox, on your wish list.
30 seconds. I would like to see all issues being everyone's issues. What I said to the commission is, if there's this type of issue, the room is packed with these kinds of folks. If it's this issue, the room is packed with these kinds of folks. At some point, the issues have got to matter to all of us, where we come together to work together on our issues. So I'm hoping that we're able to bring those groups together to deal with issues regardless of where you live or how you live, but come together because we're all in this together.
Thank you. And you get the last word, Commissioner Jack Porter.
Thank you. I think my wish list would be, it's ambitious, but it's doable, that everyone in Tallahassee would have a place that they could call home, that they could be proud of. And I think the first step to that would be hiring a social worker.
There we go. And thank you for keeping it on time.
All right. Good job, Tom.
Folks, thank you again to our Tallahassee City Commissioners, Curtis Richardson, Diane Williams-Cox, who is the Mayor Pro Tem, and Jack Porter for joining us for the Tallahassee Town Hall. Also, thank you to our studio and digital audience for their questions and for taking the time to be here with us tonight. Stay tuned for the next segment featuring our county commissioners.